Newswatch, and about that hydroxychloroquine. I'm no expert on medicine, so as you just saw, I talked to someone who is. Let him make the case for the drug or not. But as far back as April, the ABC's Media Watch show has been apparently wishing hydroxychloroquine to fail and touting any study that suggests, yes, it's no good, to embarrass wicked conservatives, you see, and embarrass Donald Trump, who kind of hoped this drug could work. Here's Media Watch host Paul Barry in April.
The drug touted as a potential cure or treatment for COVID-19 does not appear to work and can have serious side effects. All this is big news in America because only last month President Trump was trumpeting hydroxychloroquine as possibly one of the biggest game changers in the history of medicine. Sky News also pumped up the prospects of the drug. Chris Kenny told viewers the drug must surely work. Shock Alan Jones was also praising hydroxychloroquine.
If Sky News didn't exist, that bloke wouldn't have a show. Joining me is Gerard Henderson, columnist with the Australian newspaper, head of the Sydney Institute and author of the Media Watchdog blog. Gerard, thank you so much for your time. I think it's clear that for the ABC, hydroxychloroquine, well, the argument about that is not medicine, it's politics.
Well, Paul Barry has got as many scientific and medical qualifications as I have, which is zip. But he feels a need to sermonise in his taxpayer-funded Media Watch program, and he's after political opponents. So he went for Chris Kenny, he went for Alan Jones, he went for Donald Trump. But that had nothing to do with science, and I am interested in what various medical experts say. I can't judge it, but nor can he, but I don't, and he does. So he's essentially into propaganda, and he's essentially into sermonising. And it's pretty unwise, because if you sermonise about these matters within a few months, I mean, another scientific event will come up and probably change it. So, but look, this is a long-standing tactic of Mr Barry. I've made the point on this program before. If you look at the Fox News in the United States, Howard Kurtz does the Media Buzz program. He doesn't sermonise, he hears different views. It's a pluralistic program. Republicans go on it, Democrats go on it, people without politics go on it. But we don't get that here in Australia with Media Watch. We just get sermons, 15-minute sermon, just like the old days in church, you know, except the secular.
No, I think less interesting than old days in church, to be perfectly honest. Gerard, at the top of the show, I mentioned the death in jail of David Dungay, who the Guardian Australia called the symbol of the Black Lives Matter movement in Australia. And I asked why none of the media reports I quoted had mentioned his crimes and exactly why prison warders were trying to stop him from eating biscuits. That it wasn't just out of some, hatred of a guy enjoying himself or because they were racist. What do you think is going on here?
Well, I've read the report by the Deputy Coroner in New South Wales, and I'm very sympathetic to the deceased man and to his family. But it's a very detailed report, and no one was blamed. Recommendations have been made about how such an event shouldn't happen in the future. The coroner was very sympathetic to the deceased man and to his family, but no one was blamed. So other people now are taking, and I can understand his family and his mother, I can understand their position, but people beyond the family are taking up the cause to make their political points. And if you read the coroner's findings, very detailed findings, there is no reason to suggest that prison officers, and certainly not police officers, but neither prison officers had any intention of harming or killing the deceased man. So it's now become a political tactic.
Look, you're so right. You don't have to agree with the report, but at least mention why this, David Dungay, why they were trying to stop him from eating biscuits. It wasn't some sort of capricious meanness. And I would have thought, maybe mentioning why he's in jail to explain that he wasn't in jail simply because the system's racist. But you've got the taxpayer-funded ABC, the taxpayer-funded SBS, backing the Black Lives Matter narrative on this point against our police. Same with 3 taxpayer-funded academics writing in the taxpayer-funded Conversation, saying there has been a national silence about racialised police violence and deaths in custody of First Nations people. We must decolonise our legal system. First of all, Gerard, being far better educated than I, What does decolonising our legal system look like, and why are our taxes subsidising so many attacks on our society? Have we got a death wish here?
Well, I've read the article. I don't know what decolonise means in this instance. I have no idea. I mean, it's got 3 authors and it hasn't made it any better. Might have been better with one, but I don't know what that means. But what I do read into it is a very serious point. What they really want to do is de-police, take police out of Indigenous communities. Now, from my knowledge of my talking to Indigenous Australians and my reading about this matter, the plight of Indigenous Australians, men, but particularly women and children, would be in a devastating situation if you withdrew police from these communities. But that seems to be what they're saying. They're not saying how you would overcome any problems of crime. They're simply saying the police... Well, they're actually accusing the police essentially of a form of genocide without a scrap of evidence, without any evidence whatsoever, and then suggesting that, therefore, they should be taken out of these communities, which I think would send horror into the hearts of many Indigenous Australians living in these communities. So it's remarkably irresponsible. But I mean, as you said, the taxpayer conversation is the conversation is funded by taxpayers. It's got a left-wing editor, and essentially it runs for most of the time, not all the time, and essentially it advances left-wing causes.
Well, I've run out of time, but just quickly to the last part of that question. We taxpayers are funding attacks on our society and the people who are guardians of it. How did that work?
Well, it worked because over half a century, the left took over a large number of institutions in this country, including many social sciences departments in university, the public broadcaster, which is a conservative-free zone now, and other taxpayer-funded organisations like The Conversation. The left has taken over, and the Conservatives haven't really stood up the way they should have. Some have, but most haven't, so we're now in this situation. It's not new. It was around in the 1960s when I was first at university, but it's much worse now than it was 50 years ago, and it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. No,
and the difference now is that they've got the taxpayers to fund all this. This is the difference from the George Orwell days, etc., etc.